For as long as I can remember, I was the daughter who blended into the wallpaper. Not invisible in the dramatic movie montage way, just overlooked. The kind of invisible where your mom forgets to mention you when she's bragging to her friends. The kind where your dad introduces your brother first at every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every single moment that should have felt equal, but never did. My name is Rachel. I'm 32 years old. I'm a physical therapist. And for most of my adult life, I accepted that in my family. I was simply background noise. My brother Tyler is 3 years older than me. And from the moment I was old enough to understand the difference, I understood that Tyler was the sun in our family's solar system. Everything orbited around him. His baseball games, his grades, his college acceptance, his job offers, his girlfriend, then his fiancé, then his wife. Every milestone Tyler hit was treated like a national holiday. My mother would call relatives, neighbors, people she hadn't spoken to in years, just to announce whatever Tyler had done now. I don't want to make my parents sound like monsters. They weren't. They were just focused. Laser focused on Tyler in a way that left very little light for anyone else. My dad coached Tyler's Little League team for 6 years. He never once came to my academic bowl competitions. Not one. I won 3 regional titles in high school. My mom made me a cake each time. That was it. A cake and a hug. And then the conversation, inevitably, turned back to Tyler. When Tyler got into the University of Michigan on a partial athletic scholarship, my parents threw him a party. 40 people in our backyard, catered food, a banner. When I got into the same university the following year, full academic scholarship, by the way, covering everything, my dad shook my hand and said, "That's great, Rach. Make sure you stay focused." Then he went back to watching the game. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I preferred being under the radar, that the pressure Tyler lived under must have been exhausting, that I was actually the lucky one. I repeated these things to myself so many times that I almost believed them. I moved back home for 1 year after graduation to save money before starting my physical therapy residency in Chicago. That year nearly broke me. Not because anything dramatic happened. It was the quiet accumulation of 1,000 small moments. My mom asking Tyler for advice on home repairs and not me, even though I'd spent a summer doing construction volunteer work in college. My dad forwarding Tyler articles about financial planning and investment, copying me on nothing. Family dinners where Tyler's opinions on politics, sports, the economy, the neighbors were received like wisdom from a sage, while my contributions were met with polite nods and subject changes. Tyler, to his credit, didn't rub it in. He wasn't cruel about it. He just accepted his position the way people accept the weather. It's there. It's always been there. Why question it? I moved to Chicago and threw myself into my residency. I worked 60-hour weeks. I was good at my job, genuinely good. The kind of good that made attending physicians stop and watch me work. I had a gift for understanding how the body compensated for pain, how patients protected injured parts by shifting load to healthy ones, creating new problems in the process. I understood, maybe better than I should have, what it looked like when something hidden was bearing all the weight. During those first 2 years in Chicago, I also started something on the side. Not because I had a grand vision, because I had a problem I couldn't solve. My clinic served a lot of elderly patients and post-surgical recovery cases. And the thing I noticed over and over was that patients would make great progress in our sessions and then regress at home because they weren't doing their exercises correctly without supervision. They'd forget the sequence. They'd do the movements wrong. They'd skip sessions because they didn't feel confident. And when they came back to me, we'd spend half our session undoing the backslide instead of building forward. There were apps for physical therapy exercise guides, bad ones, generic ones. The kind built by software developers who had never watched an 80-year-old woman try to remember which direction to rotate her shoulder. I started sketching out what a better one would look like. On my lunch breaks, on the train home, on weekends when I probably should have been sleeping. I met a woman named Danielle at a conference in 2019. She was a software engineer who had spent 3 years building patient management tools for a hospital network before going independent. We had coffee, then dinner, then a 3-hour conversation that ended with us both agreeing we should try to build this thing together. We spent the next 2 years building it. I handled the clinical side, the content, the protocol design, the patient experience. Danielle built the architecture. We hired a contract designer. We did a small beta with my clinic's patients, got results that made our attending physician ask us, twice, if we were sure the data was right. Discharge rates for our beta patients improved significantly. Readmission for PT-related complications dropped. We had something real. We brought on a small seed round, hired 3 people, did a proper launch. I will not pretend this was easy. I was still working full-time as a physical therapist because we needed the revenue and because I believed in what I was doing clinically and because, honestly, I was terrified to let go of the thing I knew I was good at before I knew if the other thing was going to work. I worked morning shifts, sometimes I worked evenings, and in the hours between and after, I worked on the company. I was tired in a way that lived in my bones. Danielle will tell you I showed up to more than one of our video calls looking like I had just been pulled from a river. But here is what I need you to understand. I was not doing it for my family. I was not doing it to prove something to my parents or to Tyler. I had genuinely stopped needing that from them. Chicago had given me distance, and distance had given me perspective. And perspective had, slowly, quietly, given me peace. I was building something because I believed in it. Because every time a patient told me the app had walked them through their exercises at 11 at night when they were scared and alone and didn't want to call anyone, I felt something that had nothing to do with my family and everything to do with why I had gone into healthcare in the first place. My parents called on birthdays and holidays. Tyler texted occasionally, mostly forwarded memes. I went home for Christmas every year, because that was the deal I had made with myself, 1 visit per year, long enough to maintain the relationship, short enough to protect my peace. The year I want to tell you about, I flew home in December with something I had never carried before, a signed acquisition agreement. 4 months earlier, a larger health technology company had approached us about acquiring Realign. That was the company's name. The conversations had been going on for months. There were lawyers and NDAs and due diligence processes that made me feel like I was living inside a documentary about things that happened to other people. In October, we signed. Danielle and I split the proceeds. She took more of the operational equity. I took more of the clinical IP equity. We had structured it carefully from the beginning. The number attached to my name in that final wire transfer was more money than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. More money than I could process emotionally. I spent the week after signing walking around Chicago, feeling faintly dissociated, like the city was a set, and I was watching myself move through it. I had told no one in my family. Not because I was planning anything. Honestly, I just didn't know how to say it. How do you call your mother and say, "Hey, so, the little side project you've never asked about, we sold it"? I kept drafting the conversation in my head, and it kept coming out wrong. Too braggy, too pointed, too laden with everything I had never said. So I said nothing. And then it was December. And I got en plan. My parents' house is in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where everyone has a 2-car garage and a strong opinion about lawn care. My mother makes the same things every Christmas. Glazed ham, green bean casserole, sweet potatoes with a little marshmallows on top, and a pie from a bakery that she transfers to her own pie dish and presents as homemade. Tyler and his wife, Melissa, drive in from Cincinnati. My aunt and uncle come, some years a cousin or two. This year, Tyler and Melissa arrived about an hour before dinner. My nephew Tyler's son, 4 years old, the name of Brody, came running through the front door and launched himself at my knees with the kind of reckless full-body commitment that only very small children and golden retrievers manage. I caught him. That part was good. Brody is genuinely wonderful, and I refuse to let any of the rest of this story make me forget that. Dinner was normal. My mother's ham was salty in the way it always is. My uncle told a story he has told at least 4 times that I have personally witnessed. Tyler talked about a promotion he was being considered for at the financial firm, where he works VP of something. I didn't catch the full title. My parents received this information the way they always received Tyler's news, with full attention, follow-up questions, my dad leaning forward, my mom refilling his glass without being asked. I ate my sweet potatoes and listened and felt, for most of the meal, genuinely fine. The peace I had built for myself in Chicago was real. I was not sitting at that table simmering. I was just sitting at that table. It was after dinner, when we had moved to the living room and my mom had brought out the bakery pie in her own pie dish, that Tyler turned to me and asked how work was going. I told him it was good. Physical therapy kept me busy. Still at the same clinic? He asked. No, actually. I left the clinic in the spring. He looked mildly surprised. Oh, doing something else? I was running my company full-time. Now I'm figuring out what's next. I had said it simply. No drama, no setup. It was just the true answer to his question. Tyler frowned. What company? And this is where I made the decision, though I didn't frame it to myself as a decision. I just answered him honestly. Realign, I said. It's a physical therapy app, patient recovery management. I've been building it for a few years with my co-founder. You were building an app? My mother said from across the room. Her tone was not unkind. It was genuinely surprised, in the way you're surprised to learn someone has a hobby you didn't know about, like finding out your neighbor breeds orchids. Since 2019, I said. My dad had looked up from the game he'd had playing quietly on his phone. I didn't know you were doing that. I know, I said. There was a pause. Tyler tilted his head. So you left the clinic to run it full-time. And now what? It didn't work out? It worked out, I said. We sold it in October. Another pause. Shorter this time. Sold it like, to another company? Tyler asked. Yes. For how much? And he laughed. When he asked it, a light laugh. Not mean, but casual, in the way that revealed he was expecting a small number. A good-for-you number. A modest exit for a side project. I could see it in his face, the gentle condescension dressed up as curiosity. I looked at him for a moment. $43 million, I said. My share. I want to be precise here, because I think the precise telling is the only honest one. Nobody gasped. Nobody choked on their pie. It wasn't a movie. What happened was a silence. A specific kind of silence that has a shape and a weight to it. My uncle put down his fork. My mother's hand went still on her coffee cup. My dad looked at me the way I imagine he would look at a stranger who had just said something in a language he almost, but didn't quite recognize. Tyler stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I could not read his face. 43 million, he repeated. Yes. Dollars. Yes. My mother made a sound, not a word, just a sound, soft and slightly strangled. The kind that precedes a sentence that hasn't arrived yet. My dad set his phone face down on the armrest. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was something close to awe, which hurt, actually, more than I expected it to, because I realized I had never seen that expression directed at me before, and now it was here, and it was because of money, and I didn't know how to feel about that. When did you, my mother started? I've been working on it since 2019. I said again. I told you I had a project. You probably don't remember. She had the grace to look uncertain, which meant she knew I was right. Rach, Tyler said. And his voice was different now. Slower, careful, like someone approaching an animal they can't quite categorize. That's incredible. Thank you. Why didn't you tell us? I held his gaze. I'm telling you now. What happened in the weeks after Christmas was, in some ways, more instructive than the dinner itself. My mother called me 3 times in January. 3 times, which was 3 more than she typically managed in a month. The calls were warm. She asked about my health, my apartment, whether I was seeing anyone, whether Chicago winters were getting any easier. She was trying, in the way people try when they have suddenly discovered they have been careless with something valuable. My dad emailed me. He emailed me. My father, who I could count on 2 hands the number of personal emails he had sent me in my life, sent me a 2-paragraph message telling me he was proud of me and asking if I wanted to get lunch sometime soon, just the 2 of us. I read it 4 times. I wanted to feel warm about it. I felt warm about it and also profoundly sad about it, and I couldn't fully separate the 2. Tyler texted, "Seriously, Rach, I had no idea. You're kind of a badass." I appreciated that one, actually. It felt the most like him. But here is what I want to say to anyone who is sitting somewhere right now, recognized too late by people who should have seen you all along. The money is not the point. I know that sounds easy for me to say. I know it sounds like the kind of thing people say when they have the money, but I mean it. The $43 million did not give me what I actually wanted from my family. What I wanted was for my dad to have come to one academic bowl. I wanted my mom to have asked, even once, about the company before it was worth something. I wanted Tyler to have called not because he was finally impressed, but because he thought of me and wanted to hear my voice. The money revealed something that had always been true and that I had, on some level, always known. My family's attention was conditional. It had always been conditional. Tyler received it because of what he represented to them, a certain kind of legible, familiar success. I had not represented that, and so I had not received it. Now the calculus had shifted, and they were recalibrating, and I could see the machinery of it working, and I did not hate them for it, but I could not pretend it was love in the way I had once needed it to be. I had a long conversation with my therapist in February. I told her about the dinner, the silence, the calls, my dad's email. She asked me what I felt most. I told her, relieved. Not vindicated, not satisfied, relieved. Because I had carried for a very long time the faint, persistent worry that maybe they were right. That maybe I was the less impressive one. That maybe the background was where I belonged. And now I had irrefutable evidence I had built with my own hands over 5 years of 12-hour days and red-eye flights and late nights staring at spreadsheets. I barely understood that none of that had ever been true. I was never background noise. I was just in a room with people who weren't listening. I still go home for Christmas. I went last December. My mother made her ham. My uncle told his story. Brody is 5 now and has developed a sophisticated interest in dinosaurs that I find genuinely fascinating and that my dad finds slightly alarming. Tyler and I have a better relationship now, more honest, less performative. He asked me a few months ago if I had any advice about a business idea he was exploring, and I gave him 2 hours of my honest thinking, and it felt, for the first time, like we were equals. My parents are still my parents. They are trying in the ways that older people try when they realize they missed something imperfectly, inconsistently, but with genuine intention. I have chosen to let the effort matter, even when the execution is clumsy. Not because I owe them that, but because I am 32 years old and I have $43 million and I have worked very hard to build a life I am proud of, and carrying old grievances into that life felt like a waste of a good future. I didn't build Realign to prove anything to my family, but if it proved something, it proved this. The work you do in the rooms where no one is watching is the most honest work you will ever do. The version of you that shows up at midnight to solve a problem nobody asked you to solve, that is the real version. Not the one performing for approval, not the one shrinking herself into the background to avoid comparison. That version doesn't need the room to go quiet to know she was worth listening to all along.